Tonight, a special report on Aleppo under siege. Our cameras are inside hospitals, providing no refuge from the horror coming under constant assault. Plus, the bravery of the white helmets. We speak to the volunteers who've rescued thousands from the rubble.
Also on the programme, braced for a Brexit rollercoaster, the Chancellor warns of turbulent times ahead.
The reality TV star Kim Kardashian flees Paris after being robbed of millions. And
We're so proud. Thank you.
Honouring Monty Python's Terry Jones, recently diagnosed with dementia.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin.
good evening. It is all too easy to turn away from the constant reports of horror and carnage emerging from Syria. But this week we make no apology for focusing on the appalling tragedy in the city of Aleppo. 96 children were killed there just last week. 223 others were injured in the relentless airstrikes by the government and its Russian allies.
Nowhere there is safe. Even the hospitals still trying to treat victims are considered prime targets. All weekend, camera teams working for ITV News have recorded the suffering of civilians in the rebel-held area of the city, hearing first-hand from those living with the constant threat of bombing. In the eastern part of Aleppo, around 250,000 people are surrounded by government forces. There's little running water and only 6 functioning hospitals left.
In those hospitals, we see a girl badly injured after playing with a cluster bomb she thought was a toy, and another little girl whose home was hit. And a warning, Emma Murphy's report contains images of their injuries from the beginning.
The trace lines on this screen offer doctors the only information they have about the little girl it monitors. She is for sure gravely ill, her tiny ankle tethered to the bed to stop her falling or harming herself further. But who she is, how old, who loves her and who should be at her bedside as she hovers between life and death is a mystery to them. She was found after an airstrike, and as no one has asked for her, they're assuming that her family were killed in the attack, victims of the relentless onslaught on eastern Aleppo. They do know about this little girl. Eman is 4 years old. She was playing outside when she picked up what she thought was a toy. It was actually a cluster bomb and tore through her tiny frame. The rules of war are just not being abided by, this doctor says, acknowledging it's not just the innocents in society being struck now, but the places which also seek to care for them. The attacks which have done such harm to Aleppo's people and decimated its hospitals continue today. A bunker-busting bomb hitting and destroying what was left of the M10 hospital. Though it was already out of action after earlier strikes, some staff were still there and trapped beneath the rubble. Colleagues shouted to them in the hope they could be rescued, but at least 3 were killed. It is the 7th strike on the hospital in a week. This was what was left yesterday, terrible indicators of the harm which befell people in a place meant to be safe. Staff have spent days trying to retrieve anything salvageable as patients were moved elsewhere.
The all staff was transferred to the ER and faced a very bad situation because the very large number of patients.
Every one of the 6 remaining hospitals is now treating the casualties of war. There's little space to treat those with the medical emergencies of normal life, and so many of them will also lose their lives due to the siege of Aleppo.
And all this week we will be bringing you some of the names and the stories of the young victims of this terrible war. On Friday, 11-year-old Mohammed and his sister, 3-year-old Khadisha Darwish, died together in their Aleppo home. They were hit by shrapnel from a bomb and could not be saved. Their father is an aid worker in the city.
And what little hope there is for families in the rebel-held areas of Aleppo comes from the brave volunteers known as the White Helmets. When the bombs fall, the civilian defence force members rush in, risking their lives to save others.
It is vital and courageous work, and it could see the organisation awarded a Nobel Peace Prize later this week. Our Middle East correspondent Geraint Vincent went to its headquarters in southern Turkey, where one White Helmet volunteer said he just wants the violence to end.
On the road into Aleppo, the night is lit up by brutality. Those explosions are airstrikes, which destroyed an aid convoy on its way to the city. A man stands in the wreckage. He's too late to save any of the 20 aid workers who were killed here. All he can do is point out evidence of a war crime.
More than 20 vehicles, 20 trucks full of food and flour and medicine and pampers and blankets.
It was far from the first outrage he'd borne witness to, and when I met up with Ammar al-Salmo a week later, it was clear that seeing such inhumanity is part of his routine.
When these aircrafts shell the civil defense centers, to the local council vehicles, to the medical facilities, it's just want also to kill the hopes. And to kill hope. To kill hopes of the people. This is a message even to the people that we will kill you whenever you go. We will follow you and kill you.
Ammar is a member of the White Helmets, a volunteer organisation which operates in rebel-held areas of Syria under siege from government forces and their allies. They're the first responders to an airstrike, pulling victims from the rubble and getting them to medical care. Ammar and his colleagues are themselves targets. The regime likes to employ an old terrorist tactic, waiting for the rescuers to arrive and then dropping another bomb. In the White Helmet's office in southern Turkey, where Ammar's having a few days' break from the conflict, one wall bears the names of those who've given their lives trying to save others.
Any man who wants to join the White Helmets, he first of all should acknowledge and know that it is a hard duty, it is a hard mission, it is a dangerous mission.
The strike on the aid convoy was a new low, and it sparked a fresh round of international condemnation, which after 5 years, Ammar is tired of hearing.
Condemnation do nothing for the Syrian people. Stop the killing, stop the aircrafts from killing the people. That's what we need, that's what Syrian people needs.
Ammar hopes to be back in Aleppo tomorrow morning. The trauma of his work takes an obvious toll, but he's driven by the knowledge his colleagues don't help people there. No one will. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
And our correspondent Emma Murphy is here. Emma, such terrible pictures in your report and in Geraint's as well. And today the World Health Organization saying that any medical facilities in Aleppo have been pretty much obliterated now.
Yes, and you can see why when you think that Aleppo started out with 8 hospitals, it's gone down to 6, and actually in the last few minutes we've been told it's actually 5 that are now operational, and they're only dealing with the most seriously injured people. So those who really are suffering from heart attacks and things like that, they're just not being able to be treated. We're only dealing with war wounded. And the World Health Authority says that they believe that they're being targeted and taken out one by one. That is a really significant situation. And when you think about it, these hospitals are treating the most seriously injured. The children that we heard about earlier, little Mohammed and his sister Khadija, who died in that attack on their home. You know, if they had any chance, it would have been in those hospitals, but those hospitals themselves are being targeted. And I think it's probably worth remembering that they're actually changing the way these hospitals are being targeted. Bunker busting bombs. They're going down underground so that if they're trying to operate under the ground, there's no safety there either.
It's just horrifying. Emma Murphy, thank you. And there is much more on this story on our website. And straight after this programme, you can join Geraint Vincent on our Facebook site at facebook.com/ITV News, where Geraint will be taking your questions.
Now here, the Chancellor has warned that Britain's economy faces a bumpy ride ahead with continued uncertainty over Brexit. But in his speech to the Conservative Party conference, Philip Hammond insisted he would take whatever steps are necessary to protect jobs and businesses. And that includes breaking with the policies of his predecessor and scrapping the promise to balance the books. Our political correspondent Libby Vina was listening to the Chancellor in Birmingham.
Venturing onto a building site without a high-vis jacket, as a symbol of breaking with the era of George Osborne, it couldn't have been clearer. But his successor used his speech today to signal something else too. Brexit would happen, but leaving the EU might not be painless.
No ifs, no buts, no second referendums. We are leaving the European Union. But it is equally clear to me that the British people did not vote on June 23rd to become poorer or less secure.
Poorer, but hadn't Mrs May told us to ignore the pessimists yesterday? Her Chancellor seemed to have some very real worries today, promising to do what he could to protect business.
Throughout the negotiating process, we are ready to take whatever steps are necessary to protect this economy from turbulence.
Reducing the deficit was still a priority, but the promise to run a surplus had gone.
The deficit remains unsustainable, and the decision to leave the EU has introduced new fiscal uncertainty. The fiscal policies that George Osborne set out were the right ones for that time. But when times change, we must change with them. So we will no longer target a surplus at the end of this Parliament.
Mr Hammond said there'd be no ifs or buts over Brexit, but his speech was full of ifs and buts, suggesting he shares the view of some in his party that it would be best for Britain to try to stay within the single market. Among them, the former Education Secretary, Nicky Morgan.
My message is to think very carefully before throwing away access to the single market in a bid solely to control immigration. It has to be about both of those things working together for the benefit of the country.
But what of the measures the Chancellor's proposed?
He is suggesting that if he weren't doing things, and possibly some quite big things, we would get poorer. Whether he's able to cushion us entirely, I think a lot of people still doubt.
Mr Hammond said he would do his best, but he clearly didn't think it would be easy. Libby Vina, ITV News, Birmingham.
Well, our political editor Robert Peston joins us now from the conference. And Robert, pretty clear then, the Chancellor thinks there are some tough times ahead.
That's right. I mean, beneath the brave show of unity here in Birmingham, this is a party that's divided. The Chancellor does believe the economy will slow down next year. He is more pessimistic than many of his colleagues. He has ripped up George Osborne's controls on borrowing. Again, that doesn't please all the delegates here who remain worried about the deficit and Britain's rising debts. And then he does have a very different vision of Britain's future relationship with the European Union. There was a sort of hush that came on the hall when he said it was important that British companies did have access to highly skilled people after we leave the EU. That was not a message that delegates here were desperate to listen to, and more than that, he wants the UK to have a more intimate relationship with the single market than has been signalled, for example, by the Brexiteer Trade Minister Liam Fox. This battle over Britain's post-Brexit identity is going to go on, and it is, I think, at some point going to tear this party apart.
All right, Robert, thank you very much.
The mother of an RAF gunner who disappeared 9 days ago has made a public appeal for help. 23-year-old Corrie McKeague was last seen walking alone after a night out with friends in Bury St Edmunds.
Detectives are trying to find his phone, which they think may have ended up in a bin lorry, but they say they don't think he's been abducted. Dan Rivers has more.
It is a mystery that has confounded the police and his family. RAF serviceman Corrie McKeague's last known movements caught on CCTV a week last Friday as he wandered through Bury St Edmunds after a night out drinking with friends. But after this last sighting, he disappeared without a trace. Today, his mother appealed for witnesses.
Well, there seems to be No evidence just now to suggest what has happened to Corrie. At 03:24 on Saturday morning, he was seen on CCTV, and so far there is not a single bit of corroborated evidence that shows where my son has gone.
Corrie McCaig was last seen in the Mildenhall area of Bury St Edmunds in the early hours of the 24th of September. He'd been on a night out and was heading home to his base at RAF Honington. The 23-year-old's phone was tracked to 20 miles north of the town, where it's thought to have been carried by a bin lorry, but the RAF serviceman remains missing. Corrie is described as being fit, healthy and active. His family say it's highly unusual for him not to make contact. A huge search across Suffolk still hasn't found any clues. Police say there is no evidence of abduction, despite speculation it may be linked to the attempted kidnapping of another RAF serviceman in July by two men of Middle Eastern appearance.
It's a missing person inquiry, it's not an abduction inquiry. There's nothing to suggest at this stage that there's any third party involved, but quite rightly you would expect me to say that we rule nothing in and we rule nothing out.
His family are growing ever more anxious for the young man who was in daily contact with his brothers and mother. It's been 10 days since Corrie disappeared, his family describing the whole experience as surreal. They say on previous nights out he had attempted to walk the 10 or so miles back to his RAF base, and that's where the search has been concentrated. But that search area is now being widened, with the police asking anyone who may have seen anything to call them here at the incident room on 101.
Dan Rivers in Bury St Edmunds, thank you.
Right, still to come on the ITV Evening News, an exclusive report on NHS rationing. We reveal how those with celiac disease are the latest to be hit.
Honouring Terry Jones, a Lifetime Achievement Award for the Monty Python legend.
But first, the reality TV star Kim Kardashian West has arrived back in New York this evening after being robbed at gunpoint in Paris. She was left badly shaken but unhurt in the incident last night. Millions of pounds worth of her jewellery was stolen. A group of armed men forced their way into a luxury apartment where she was staying and tied her up in a bathroom. From Paris, Richard Pallow has the latest.
Back in New York this afternoon, Kim Kardashian, reunited with her husband Kanye West, relieved to be home after her ordeal in the early hours of this morning. Across the Atlantic, she had been attacked by masked armed men inside this exclusive Paris address, bound up in her own bathroom before £8 million of her jewellery was stolen. The reality TV star is not exactly shy when it comes to flaunting her wealth. She is frequently draped in diamonds on her social media accounts. Among what was taken is believed to be her engagement ring, reportedly from her bedside table and worth £4 million. The five men, all dressed as police officers, entered through this door. They then handcuffed the concierge before putting a gun to his head and demanding that he took them to her apartment. Kim Kardashian was then herself tied up. She is said to be badly shaken, but physically unharmed. She shot to fame in the reality show Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
As soon as I get on that Grammy red carpet.
And had been staying in the French capital for Fashion Week and was without her partner, Kanye West. He was on stage in the US, the rapper abandoning his concert as soon as he heard what had happened.
I'm sorry, there's a family emergency, I have to stop the show.
One policeman close to the investigation admitting the thieves will be difficult to catch.
According to the concierge, they were masked and wearing gloves. The CCTV will give us some clues, but we won't be able to recognize them.
Kim Kardashian had flown out of France, hidden under a black scarf, for those few hours at least, wanting to remain out of the limelight. Richard Pallow, ITV News, Paris.
Police searching for the missing toddler Ben Needham have asked permission to knock down part of a farmhouse close to where he was last seen on the Greek island of Kos. They are in talks with the homeowners after learning an extension was built in the house after he went missing in 1991.
And thousands of residents across the Caribbean are bracing themselves for one of the most powerful storms in years. Hurricane Matthew. The islands of Haiti, the Bahamas and Jamaica could see up to a foot of rain and what's being described as life-threatening winds when it makes landfall in a little while.
Now, ITV News has learned that patients with celiac disease are having their support cut or reduced by over a third of local health services in England. The condition affects 1 in 100 people in the UK, and many need to follow an expensive diet. Well, last month we revealed how 3/4 of doctors are rationing care in England because of cost cutting. Our health editor Rachel Younger met one family who feel the NHS is turning its back on their problem.
Let's see what we can find, shall we?
For 11-year-old Bethany, shopping gluten-free is no fad. It's the only way to control the debilitating symptoms of celiac disease. But it's not cheap.
We need some more plain flour, so that's it.
Her family struggling to budget after Bethany's prescription for specialist food was withdrawn overnight.
The prescription I've worked out was worth about just over £20 to us a month, but that may not seem like a lot, but when you're having to pay out extra for the special gluten-free products anyway, that's actually quite a lot to cope with.
Last year, the NHS spent £26 million on gluten-free products, but now prescriptions that have been relied upon for years are being taken away. Over a third of England's 221 CCGs, which hold the purse strings for local healthcare, are now restricting gluten-free prescriptions. And ITV News has learnt 17 have stopped them entirely for adults, with 12 regions cutting all prescriptions for children too. And they're unrepentant.
We need to be providing services for our population that they need across the whole gamut of health services. So it's important that we use the money we have got for emergency care, for cancer treatments, for surgical interventions. All that funding comes down to a commissioner to make a decision. And we make our decision based on the need of the population that we serve.
But there are concerns the food cutbacks could be a false economy.
If people can't stick to their diet, then they are at risk of things like osteoporosis. A hip fracture could cost the NHS anything between £20,000 to £70,000 to deal with.
And right now, it leaves Bethany feeling like the NHS is turning its back on a painful condition that can be contained, but only if you can afford it. Rachel Younger, ITV News, Norfolk.
And finally, there were tears on and off stage last night for a man whose acting and writing have made so many of us laugh. The Monty Python star Terry Jones was given a special award at the Welsh BAFTAs for his film and TV work.
Yes, it was revealed last month that the comedian has a rare form of dementia, and his son broke down as he helped his dad accept the award, as Martha Fairley reports.
Walking the red carpet in Cardiff, this was the first public appearance for Terry Jones since the Monty Python star revealed he has dementia. Stopping to smile for the cameras, he arrived with fellow Python Michael Palin, who later presented him with BAFTA Cymru's highest honour. The Welsh-born actor and film director joked as he collected the award to a standing ovation.
Up and down.
But his dementia is slowly robbing him of his words.
We'd just like to say thank you for everyone. I know it's a great honour for Dad to win this award, and just struggles we're having at the moment is a bit hard, but we're so proud of him. Yeah. Thank you.
Terry Jones wrote, performed in and directed the film comedy The Life of Brian, and was a founding member of Monty Python. But throughout his prolific career, he also made many documentaries and is an acclaimed children's author.
I think he should have got an award long ago. Apart from being hysterically funny and writing good jokes, he's also, medieval historian respected by academics.
Recognition at last for the outstanding contribution of a man whose words have brought laughter to so many. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
And the wonderful Terry Jones.
We wish him well, and that is it for now. Raggy Omar will be here later with news at 10.
From all the team here on the Evening News. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.